Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was born in the Uchiha clan and build own harem with Uchiha girls part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Konoha Ninja Academy. All the fresh admissions of the academy students stood in the open clearing they were led into by their new instructor. The teacher picked up on his clipboard having the names and details of all the new students in his palms. He coughed to get the attention of them all, getting quite successful when all the wide and curious eyes turned to him. Alright, this is the first day of our regular weekly academy taijutsu spars we'll have from now on. Now before we begin, go and run a couple of laps around the academy for a little warm-up. He spoke up, getting nods from them. All the students starting running with Naruto and Tsunade flanking the back of the group. Why do we have to huff run for this? Tsunade asked, huffing in her jog after they had taken a complete round of the academy grounds, which were quite large in themselves. We have to warm up so we don't hurt ourselves in the spars, plus we just had lunch, so sensei must want us to warm up first. Naruto answered calmly, not at all fazed at running the laps they were ordered. He thanked his little furry friend for that. She could be quite a handful, so he was quite used to running laps behind the agile feline. You Huff have an answer for everything, Huff, don't you? She asked in annoyance, her breathing a bit labored but not losing as much as a speck of speed. Naruto though didn't quite get her point at this. Huh? He asked intelligently, making Tsunade try to sigh, but instead she panted and shook her head. Naruto just looked on ahead with a nod when the end came and Tsunade collapsed onto her knees from exhaustion. Naruto himself placed his palms on them and took deep breaths to calm down the blood rush. Alright class, that was very nice for your first day. I'm glad all of you completed your laps. The teacher's proud voice rang in the clearing, getting smiles from them all. Now come on and gather up around the ring, he said, and all of them stood up shakily, completely exhausted from running, while Naruto straightened up with a deep breath. He saw Tsunade still sitting and not looking to get up anytime soon and smiled at his lone friend sprawled on the ground right now. Come on, let's go, he said softly, extending his hand while placing the other hand on his knee with a soft smile. Tsunade looked up, brushing her flailing bangs from her face to look into the twinkling baby blue eyes as well as the outstretched hand in front of her. But for the first time she noticed how pretty his eyes were, not at all like all the other Uchiha's plain black eyes, and put her own hand in his with a grin. He pulled her up and she dusted her kimono off when she caught him in a headlock, much to his confusion. She couldn't let him think she wasn't able to get up on her own after all. That doesn't mean I couldn't get up on my own, get it? She asked sternly, making him a little confused yet again, but he nodded dumbly, figuring that was the best thing to do right now. She grinned and nodded, placing her hands behind her back with a cheeky smile, and walked along with him to the sparring ring. Now children, I'll introduce all of you to the sacred tradition of shinobi hand-to-hand combat. These were used by our Hokages themselves to toughen them up, he said, perking up most of the ears around the ring. We will go through one-on-one paired combat exercises to simulate a situation of real combat and let you have the experience needed when you further your shinobi careers. I'll explain the rules along with the spar, so can Ensui Nara and Hyasuke Hyuga please enter the ring? He called out, and the two boys stepped in the ring. One with his hair in a high albeit lazily tied ponytail, while the other had his clan's signature pupil-less white eyes to signify his clan status for him. Alright, now both of you raise your hand like this. He showed them a half-ram seal in front of his chest and both copied the man. This is called the seal of confrontation. It usually marks the beginning of a jutsu, so it signifies your willingness to fight an opponent. When you end the spar, you both clasp the seals together as a mark of goodwill and friendship to your opponent. This is called the seal of reconciliation. So now, do the both of you get this much? He asked the two, instead getting nods from all of them around the ring in unison. So now I'll explain the rules of engagement. The fight ends either when the opponent is put in a position where he can't fight back. No weapons or jutsus except kunais can be used, and the two for only hand-to-hand combat. No maiming or fatal blows to harm your opponent are allowed. The person who steps outside the ring loses automatically too, and I can step in at any moment to stop the spar if I see someone is going to get hurt. Do I make myself clear? He asked sternly, getting nods from the two boys and smiled, raising his hand. Then let's have an honorable first spar, Hajime. He called out with Hyasuke dropping in his usual gentle fist stance. Though all of them were confused when Ensui turned around and started walking away until he was finally outside the ring. Thick silence reigned in the clearing at the strange actions of the Nara boy. Ensui, what are you doing? The teacher finally asked the boy, who merely let out a lazy yawn and shrugged. You said that stepping out of bounds signifies defeat, sensei, so I willingly lost since one of us must lose for this troublesome spar to end. It is merely logical for me to do so, to end it as quickly as possible, more so since it is too much work, he mumbled, lazily scratching his head, making the teacher slap his hand over his face. Everyone snickered at the teacher's expense, who decided to let it go since this was only the first day. And it wasn't surprising for someone from the Nara clan to do this, they were renowned for it actually. Alright, just please make the seal of reconciliation before you go, if that is not too much work, that is, the teacher said dryly, and sighed tiredly when they did. Though Hyasuke did have a small scowl on his face at not getting his spar as he had wanted to, but said nothing in the end and both walked out. The teacher rummaged through the list and smiled when he read the next two names out loud. Akio Inuzuka and Jin Uchiha, step into the ring please. His voice rang out through the silence of the clearings. The two boys in question stepped forward, their faces completely polar opposites to that of their opponent. Akio had simple shaggy brown hair with the classic red Inuzuka tattoos donned over his cheeks. His teeth, having two feral canines like all the Inuzukas, were displayed on show with his smug and prideful grin. Jin, on the other hand, was an Uchiha straight through to the textbook. The boy had the signature onyx black eyes with matching spiky raven hair of his clan. The boy's eyes looked bored while his face was stoic, trying to hide the little excitement that came at the prospect of facing his first opponent in combat. Alright, today's my day. I get to beat an Uchiha down into the ground on my very first day, talk about luck. Akio boasted proudly, but frowned when he heard a scoff from his opponent. As if, Jin muttered, but Akio's sharp ears picked up on his whisper and he scowled. You've got something to say? He growled out heatedly, getting yet another snort from the ever-stoic Uchiha. I said, as if a mud like you could ever even hope to touch me, an Uchiha. We are called the elites of the village for a reason, and I'll show the reason to you right now, he stated confidently, without a hint of doubt in his voice, making the Inuzuka glare at him. His fangs were bared while he looked ready to rip his head apart if need be. We'll just see about that, he spoke angrily, dropping into the first kata of the Inuzuka's widely known Fang Taijutsu style. That we will, Jin spoke up, entering the most basic of Uchiha clan's many taijutsu stances. The Uchiha clan had seemingly created many stances over the years by embedding many of their copied stances and modifying them to be used with their Sharingan. Only a select few still use the original and ancient stances of the old times that belonged purely to them now, most of them being considered long since forgotten, so seemingly every Uchiha fought in a different way than the other to appear deceptive and unpredictable to enemy shinobi. Alright, that's enough, break it off you two. Now make the seal of confrontation, the teacher ordered and nodded when the two boys did so, albeit a bit reluctantly in Jin's case. He pulled his hand up over his head and brought it down to signal the start of the match. Hajime, his voice rang through the clearing and Akio was off in a flash. He charged forward with a battle cry, rushing his opponent by running towards him. Jin merely stood fast in his own stance, letting the boy make the first move and have his fun while he was at it. Akio edged his fist back behind his head and brought it forward. Jin merely slapped it away with the back of his hand to let it whiz past his ear and blocked his left fist with his own right palm. The raven-haired kid went to put a huge uppercut under his chin and seemingly end the match, but the Inuzuka jumped back a couple of steps to break off their little bout. Jin yet again dropped into his defensive stance and put his palm in front of his face. His hand made a motion to his opponent to urge him to attack. Akio saw his taunt coupled with his arrogant smirk, and the Inuzuka clan's legendary temper kicked in. All he saw was red. He charged forward, jumping up and aiming a kick for the Uchiha's neck. Jin brought his right arm up and blocked it with his forearm, aiming for his opponent's torso with his free left hand. The blow being quite weak from the lack of precision the completely angered boy was putting behind it. Akio, still unbalanced from his angered and blind charge, could do nothing more than watch the incoming strike to his stomach and brace for impact while he landed on his feet with a little stumble. Jin mustered up all his strength into the strike, twisting his wrist and embedding his fist into the boy's solar plexus, who stumbled back a couple of feet and fell to his knees, clutching his aching stomach with an agonized cough. Jin ran in and jumped up, twisting his body in midair to make his right heel make contact with the feral boy's cheek, who rolled sideways and out of the ring's boundary line. Clap, clap, clap. The whole audience around the ring clapped for the two, especially the teacher, who was pretty loud and felt proud to have such a great spar on seemingly his first day. Excellent, you two. I couldn't be prouder to see such an excellent spar on our first day. Jin, you were especially excellent. Not that I could expect anything less from a member of the Uchiha clan, the teacher said, pride evident in his voice. The raven soaked it all in with a slight puff of his chest and walked back with an arrogant smirk. Sugoi Jin-kun, that was so awesome. Many girls squealed in delight with stars in their eyes. He walked back into the crowd, walking past Naruto with a slight bump to his shoulder. Beat that dead last, he taunted in a voice only meant for Naruto, which he promptly ignored and shrugged off his bump as if it was nothing. Naruto turned back on hearing the sound of a small thump and saw Jin lying sprawled face first on the ground. He merely tilted his head to the side in confusion as to why he would do that when he saw the boy get up, with his dirt-covered front, glaring heatedly at Tsunade, who was whistling innocently while playing with her toe, drawing circles in the ground in all the innocence of the world. You might want to get up, Uchiha, or you might ruin the proud Uchiha clan's name, she said in an all too innocent voice, making the boy growl and clench his fists tightly. Everyone around them snickered, other than Naruto, that is, who was still trying to figure out what was going on between the two. I won't forget this, Senju, Jin said angrily and got up, dusting himself off while Tsunade stuck her tongue out playfully to further annoy the already annoyed Uchiha. She felt a tug on her sleeve and looked to the side to see a quite confused Naruto looking at her questionably. What happened? Why is he so angry at you, Tsunade? Naruto asked in a lost voice, making the girl smile cheekily. She patted his cheek playfully and shook her head while the raven-haired boy walked off to the side and a ways away from them to maintain his distance. Nothing for you to worry about, she chirped happily, hiding the fact about sticking her foot out when that annoying Uchiha had bumped into her new friend to get back at him. Tsunade took nothing from annoying Uchihas without a payback, people. So why was he being such a pest to you? You two know each other or something? She asked curiously while the teacher was taking the Inuzuka boy to the infirmary to get him some checkups and rest for a little while. Naruto nodded his affirmative at knowing the boy. Jin and I have met in the past in our clan grounds. He hangs out with other kids from our clan, he explained, getting a scowl from Tsunade. She didn't want to tell him that he was the Tem that was on the top of her bullies to beat list and merely nodded, motioning for him to go on. Well, they don't like me hanging out with them, so I always keep my distance from him, he explained and got a nod from the girl who could see his point. She wouldn't want anything to do with that annoying brat as well. But he especially doesn't like me since I wear the Uchiha clan symbol on my clothes so early while he cannot, and is always trying to show me up in front of others, he spoke as an afterthought, getting a confused look from Tsunade. She looked on closely on his collars to see his clan symbol and even the one on the back of his neck, and then glanced at the brooding boy who had none whatsoever on his plain dark blue clothes. What's wearing a clan symbol got to do with you two? She asked in a completely lost voice, making Naruto confused too. Then he remembered not many people outside of their clan knew of their traditions and nodded to himself, further confusing the girl. Right, you wouldn't know, but not anyone can wear our clan symbol just like that. It is a matter of pride for our clan to wear it on our clothes and represent our clan in front of others. Only those who have passed our rite of passage can wear it on themselves after getting the approval of any one clan elder. He explained calmly, getting a nod from the girl, who had her finger over her chin while she absorbed the new information in. Then her eyes went to the clan symbols donned on his clothes. So you have passed this rite of passage and he hasn't? She asked curiously and got a simple nod from the boy, making her grin and catch him in a headlock. Cool. She chirped happily, ruffling his hair while he tried to shake the excited girl off. Then another thought ran through her mind, making her let go off the boy, who sighed in relief and straightened out his shirt slowly. What is this rite of passage thing anyways? She asked him curiously, making him smile at the ever-curious girl. It is a small ritual of sorts that all Uchiha have done since ancient times. The Uchiha clan doesn't deem their members worthy to wear the clan symbol until they master the fireball jutsu completely and show it to an elder of the clan, who then gives them his approval to wear our symbol on our clothes. I completed it a month ago and showed it to Kagami Oji-san, who gave me his approval. Jin hasn't yet, so he doesn't like it very much that I can wear it while he cannot. He trailed off, seeing the glittering eyes of Tsunade looking at him proudly, and stood there confused when she caught his shoulders in her hands tightly. You can shoot awesome cool fireballs from your mouth? She asked in barely contained excitement, making the boy quite confused at her sudden perking up, but he nodded dumbly. She was quite impulsive, he told himself, and nodded inwardly in a sage-like manner. You should so do it in your spar. I bet everyone will be amazed, and the look on that Baka's face. Tsunade giggled mischievously, making the boy quite confused yet a little worried, seeing her strange laugh and rubbing of her palms together with a spaced-out look on her face. He put his palm on her forehead and the other one on his own, making the girl snap out of her little daytime fantasy to look at the worried eyes of her blue-eyes friend. Your temperature seems fine, Naruto mumbled to himself and nodded, making the girl become agitated at his innocent insinuation. Oi, she said indignantly, but the boy didn't hear her and shook his head yet again in deep thought while he went over her idea. Anyways, I can't do it in the spar, he said, making her pout cutely. And why not? She asked in an irritated voice, making him sigh softly at his short-tempered friend. It would be so awesome to see him burn up his opponent, she mused, grinning mischievously. She could just imagine the teacher and that Jin Baka's face when he did something so awesome. Once more she felt a hand on her forehead, which then moved to her cheek while she looked at a worried Naruto having a palm on his own forehead to check her temperature. Maybe we should take you to the infirmary, he mumbled, quite worried, seeing her strange expressions, making her eye twitch. She bonked his head softly, which he rubbed with much added confusion. Why won't you do it? She asked, trying to change the topic and save herself any further embarrassment from the innocently oblivious blonde friend of hers. Sensei said we can't use any ninjutsu, remember? He asked, making her pout yet again. She was about to open her mouth to say that rules can be bent every once in a while when he continued on. Plus, I can hurt my sparring partner by doing that. That won't be nice, he whispered to himself, making her pout increase with a slight puff of her cheeks. She tried to come up with a retort and opened her mouth before closing it wordlessly, and in the end just kept up her pout. Killjoy, she mumbled, sulking at having her awesome plan failed before it could even begin, and now Naruto felt bad at making her so sad. He didn't want his only friend to be sad all because of him, and poked her arm cutely to get her attention. But I can show you after the academy if you want to see it so much. He asked to make her feel a little better, and instantly all her sadness lay forgotten when she grinned and nodded. Yeah, we'll do that. So now let's beat up our opponents and then you can spout some cool fireballs for me all evening long. She cheered happily, raising her fist up in happiness. Naruto was confused and wondered what to do when he raised his own fist up to copy her and she blushed in embarrassment, pulling his hand down when all the eyes around them turned to their antics. What are you doing? She whispered in a hushed, embarrassed voice and he rubbed his neck sheepishly with a careless shrug, having no idea himself and got a soft sigh from her lips. But she couldn't help but smile at his helpless smile and perked up seeing her sensei come back from the infirmary and taking his place back in front of the ring, to make all the whispers around cease momentarily. Alright, now moving on to the next spar. He trailed off to see who was matched next and everyone saw his narrowing of eyes before he looked back up to the all of them with a stoic blank face. Tsukumo Hatake and Naruto Uchiha, please step into the ring, he said in a tone of finality. Naruto grew a bit nervous, hearing all the whispers and seeing all the pointed fingers with the hushed whispers of, "It's that boy," being the most prominent in them all. Go on and show him who's boss. Tsunade chirped up, giving him a slight push on his back while he stumbled a bit but regained his balance to look at her cheery face and all his fears lay forgotten. He hadn't really put anything into training his taijutsu up till now, only focusing on his ninjutsu to get his fireball jutsu mastered so he could wear the clothes that donned his clan's symbol proudly. The most experience he had in hand-to-hand combat was from what he had read in a scroll in his personal library and remembered the katas that were pictured in it. And reading didn't do much good in physical exercises, that much he knew himself. He would have to do this one on instincts alone. He stepped into the ring to see his silver-haired opponent step in with a much too serious look on his face. For Tsukumo, he had heard of the Uchiha clan's feared reputation in combat around the whole village by several adults, and from what he had seen in the previous spar he was expecting his opponent to be just as, if not, even more lethal. Though he saw the blonde boy in front of him take a deep breath to calm his nerves down and smiled seeing his nervousness. Let's have a good match. Tsukumo spoke up, breaking the nervous silence between them by extending his hand for the blonde to shake as a show of some good sportsman spirit before the match unlike the previous one. Naruto smiled, albeit a bit nervously and clasped the offered hand in a shake when they all heard a shout from the crowd. Go Naruto, kick his. Tsunade shouted happily from the sidelines while shaking her hand to cheer him on, gaining incredulous looks from her not-so-minced words as well as the fact that the Senju princess herself was rooting for the village pariah proudly in front of everyone. Naruto looked a little embarrassed at the amused smile marred on the face of his opponent. You have quite an interesting friend there, he said, not at all hiding the mirth laced in his voice and Naruto nodded sheepishly. Yeah, she's a bit impulsive, he said, agreeing with him wholeheartedly. Oi, I heard that, Tsunade shouted indignantly from the sidelines, while Naruto rubbed his neck sheepishly at his frowning friend and nodded his head apologetically before she smiled and started rooting for him again. Alright, now make the seal of confrontation, the teacher finally interjected to break their antics. Both boys held the seal in front of their chest, before Tsukumo dropped into his clan's classically balanced stance of being a bit offensive as well as defensive. Naruto tried to imitate the stance he had seen in his scroll much to the confusion of all the crowd surrounding him. Alright, calm yourself down. Right palm open forward, straight in front of your chest to avoid any and all incoming blows from your opponent. Keep your left palm back, curled up halfway to either block the following attack and counterattack with your right or simply counter with your left if not the case. He recited the first paragraph in the scroll and spread his legs a bit to further his balance as per the instructions and prayed to Kami this worked out for him a little. Meanwhile in the balcony on the second floor's hallways in the academy. Two figures stood there, their elbows resting on the railing while their seasoned and veteran eyes stared at the battlefield. So why are we here again? The man standing to the right with a stoic yet slightly bored expression on his face asked. To watch the inaugural fights of the academy year, what else? The man by his side answered his query equally stoically and almost instantly getting a grunt of exasperation from his partner. Well, we haven't done this anytime in the past, he retorted dryly, quite annoyed at wasting his time here, seeing kids fight it out. There's a first time for everything then. The stoic man by his side retorted, making the man by his side glance at him curiously. You're getting old, Tobarama. The slightly bored man spoke, making the current reigning Hokage without an ounce of fear in his eyes at who it was that he was talking to. I'm not old, Tobarama retorted, almost offended at the prospect of having his age mentioned. He wasn't old, he was merely, well past his prime, yeah, that was it. The man by his side, much to his annoyance, merely chuckled a humorous laugh while shaking his head and lighting up a cigar with a small snap of his fingers to take a small puff of smoke. This is what old people like us do, pass their time while looking at those who would surpass us one day and take our reins from us when our time finally comes. To nurture ones so young with all the care we can offer, that is our duty as adults of the village, the man spoke, his voice suddenly serious and the wizened words laced with an air of experience. And you call me old, Tobarama murmured in an annoyed voice, clearly not at all happy at being called old. It was the only thing that got on his nerves, and not many had the nerve to talk to him with a straight face, much less how his partner was taking to him. The man by the Hokage's side merely pulled back his breath to inhale the smoke and let out yet another silent puff before the cigar rested expertly in between his fingers. Both adults watched the first true fight in the rings come to an end, and Tobarama scoffed. Typical Inuzuka clan members, easily riled up and lose their heads before the fight even begins. Stupidity runs in their genetics, he said, not at all impressed by the fight, while the man standing by his side nodded in agreement. He ran his hand through his shaggy brown hair, his coal-black eyes narrowed at the boy exiting the ring on his own feet. Typical Uchiha, all arrogant on a style seemingly bastardized off of some other true taijutsu stance for their almighty Sharingan, only to make themselves seem original and deceptive. How far has the great clan fallen from its true glory? He commented dryly, getting a grunt of agreement from Tobarama. The brown-haired man chuckled, seeing Tsunade trip the Uchiha when he bumped into the blonde boy by her side on purpose to get back on him. She's Hashirama's granddaughter all right, part Senju part Uzumaki, he chuckled, seeing her stick her tongue out at the seething Uchiha, who went off while red-faced in embarrassment and anger. Tobarama let out a tired sigh and palmed his face at her antics. He had to make her take a course to handle herself a bit better lest she get into trouble all the time. Though the shaggy white-haired man did perk up at the mention of the second name in the announcement of the next fight. The man by his side glanced to his side, watching the Hokage lean forward with eyes that had a hidden gleam of excitement, making him smirk knowingly. So finally the fight you dragged me here for, he commented pointedly, and Tobarama frowned at being read so easily. It was a wound to his pride as being hailed a man who was a master at hiding his emotions and completely unreadable to his opponents. That blonde boy was going to ruin his reputation soon enough like this. His partner followed his fixated gaze to the blonde boy shaking hands with his opponent, and his eyes narrowed on the small symbol embossed near the back nape of his neck, making him raise an eyebrow and lean a bit forward himself. Well, well, well. Already donning the Uchiha clan symbol on him. I can see why he intrigues you so much. This should prove to be not as boring as the other one, he spoke, clearly a little interested himself, getting seemingly no reaction from the Hokage. He glanced once more to his side, only to raise an eyebrow at seeing Tobarama's slightly wide eyes. He turned his eyes back to see what had gotten him so shocked, only for him to copy his expression a moment later. His cigar dropped from his mouth in shock at seeing the boy entering a sloppy stance of the taijutsu style they hadn't seen in action for quite some time now. Isn't that the, he murmured, still in shock, and Tobarama nodded numbly. Too shocked himself to care about his lack of masking emotions. The interceptor fist. The original taijutsu style of the Uchiha clan, he murmured, nostalgia kicking in both of their minds while their faces lit up with small proud smirks. Both their gazes rested on the crest embossed on his shirt now. He certainly does his heritage proud, the brown-haired man murmured, getting a curt nod from Tobirama. The proud smirk still not going off his face. That he does, he agreed, though his partner still couldn't get one thing. Where the hell did he come across that style? Wasn't Madara the last one to inherit it, and it was seemingly lost with him? He asked and once more got a nod from Tobirama. Though he did have a pretty good guess where the blonde might have come across such a powerful style. I have no idea, he lied smoothly, getting narrowed glances from his partner who had caught onto his lie but said nothing in the end. Now quite a lot interested in the fight himself, and let out a small puff of smoke. Back in the sparring center, Tsukumo rose an eyebrow seeing the peculiar and seemingly quite useless taijutsu stance the blonde had dropped in. It had so many holes in it that it wasn't even funny. It would most probably need godly instincts to block all the attacks that would enter his guard virtually in no time whatsoever. Though he kept the comments to himself, it would be an insult to question a fighter about his abilities on the style he uses. He dropped in his own stance, legs widely stretched with both arms in a forward guard to either defend or block at virtually the same time. The teacher saw straight through the holes in that style, though didn't comment on them, quite content to watch the brat humiliate himself in front of everybody. He pulled his hand up as a gesture to get ready, and both nodded at seemingly the same time when he brought it down, the whole clearing now in thick silence to await the pending fight. Hajime. He finally called out, and Tsukumo took this as his cue to charge his opponent head first and take the first hit and flow of the spar right from the start. His feet jogged through the small distance between them quickly, and he wanted to exploit that huge gap in his guard up front right from the beginning, and end it as quickly as he could. He closed the distance between them quickly, slowing down when he was within arm's reach of the blonde, who still stood as calm as a rock, and let him come in for the strike. Tsukumo slid his right foot in to get into his guard, when Naruto mirrored his movement and slid his left foot back almost instantly, negating Tsukumo's attempt. Though the silver-haired boy was having none of it, as was shown when he slid his left foot in a small arc into his guard, and once more Naruto slid his right foot back in the same arc to mirror his movement and render his charge virtually useless. Tsukumo finally had enough and brought his left fist near his waist and pulled it forward to Naruto's stomach, which was blocked by Naruto's right palm easily. He had his right fist back to follow up and pulled his left back when Naruto blocked it with his left palm quite efficiently. He twisted his body in a 360-degree motion to bring his left elbow for Naruto's gut, which was caught by both of Naruto's crossed palms to brace for the force behind his blow. Tsukumo brought his left knee up to his waist and pushed it towards the blonde's right bicep, who curled up his arm to block it with his forearm and put his hand behind the limb to brace for the strength behind it. Tsukumo's eyes widened in horror when he saw the blonde boy smirk ever so slightly and realized how open his own guard was now, while he was trying to penetrate his opponent's seemingly impenetrable defense. Naruto crouched down on his right knee, circling his body in a 270-degree arc to swipe off the boy's lone right leg from underneath him, as was the counter he had read about in the scroll he had found in his grandfather's personal library section. Only hours of practice gave Tsukumo the required time to hop a little and let the not-so-smooth swipe pass underneath him harmlessly while he stumbled back, a little off balance, which wasn't lost to the blonde. Naruto stood up straight and rushed ahead, ing his left fist back and pushed it forward to the silver-haired boy's face. Tsukumo tilted his head to the side, letting it slide past harmlessly, and Naruto pulled it back, following up with his right, which was slapped back by Tsukumo. Tsukumo saw him twist himself in a complete circle, and through his previous spars at home, he knew what would follow next, so he knew his chance was now. Naruto pushed his arm in a horizontal arc to aim for Tsukumo's cheek, but only met thin air, and his eyes widened in shock. Where is he? His thought trailed off midway when a strong swipe from underneath him took his legs away and dropped him flat on his back. He coughed when his back and head hit the rough ground harshly, not used to the sudden blows in spars, and felt his arm being caught in a hand when his eyes were closed momentarily. Tsukumo twisted his arm and threw him around, to make him fall down face first on the ground and painfully put it near his spine, getting a moan of pain from his opponent to make him stop lest he snap it. He flicked out a kunai from his holster and placed it on the blonde's neck to signify his defeat cleanly to the instructor who called the match. And that's the match, Shosha Tsukumo Hataki. The teacher clapped proudly and Tsukumo let the blonde's arm go. Pathetic. All the attention of the crowd turned to the snide voice from the side only to see to the source being Jin himself. Being sprawled face first in the dirt while your opponent sits on you. Even a complete loser like you shouldn't have lost so badly to someone from outside our clan. You really are a disgrace to the Uchiha clan, just like my father said you were. He finished his comment, making everyone around the boy laugh at the blonde's expense. The words pierced through Naruto's chest like a hot knife and he sat up, his hair shadowing his eyes while he clenched the dirt in his fists tightly. Like always, he didn't reply back to the taunt or the laughs. Completely oblivious to the silver-haired boy holding a seal of reconciliation for him to complete behind him. Hey kid, you alright? You're not hurt, are you? The teacher decided to add a little salt to his wound and his voice showed more of mirth than that of concern, getting another round of laughs from everyone. Sensei, not even a loser like him can be hurt from getting beaten in a single counter, Akio added smugly to add to his popularity by going with the flow of the crowd, and everyone snickered at his comment yet again. Naruto stood up and walked away, completely ignoring his opponent's confused yet worried gaze on his back. He dusted his shirt clean off the dirt and walked to the tap by the side for drinking water. He opened it up, drinking down a gulp from it before splashing some onto his face and ran his wet hand through his silky hair to make them glimmer brightly in the sun. He couldn't believe how badly he had been beaten, but not again. This was the last time, he promised himself silently. Hey, a soft girly voice called out from behind him. He turned around to see Tsunade standing there with her hands behind her back and a warm smile on her face. His hand pulled out his handkerchief and wiped off his face, staying silent to let her have her fun of taunting and making fun of him just like everyone else had done. Don't worry about them, you were awesome out there. And you'll definitely win next time, I know it. After all, we are here in the academy for quite some time, nay? She asked in her playful voice, making him look up surprised. She was still rooting for him. Aren't you here to make fun of me like the others? He asked her in a lost voice, only to have her frown at his words. She stomped her way towards him angrily, making him take a couple of steps back from the obviously angry girl who put her index finger on his nose to make him turn a lot more nervous than before. I'll let you know, I was cheering for you from start till end, Baka, she scolded him. He merely averted his eyes to the side in shame at letting her down. And never once did I laugh with them, she continued on with another poke to his nose to emphasize her point, and he looked at her with wide eyes to see the plain conviction in her eyes and behind those words. In a moment she retracted her hand back and let out her usual cheeky grin. And don't be all mopey broody, just 'cause you lost, K? She asked him, and got a tilt of the head from him in honest confusion. She placed her hands on her hips and narrowed her eyes, making him shrink under her gaze. His mother used to do that, and it was still quite effective in his mini-me of her right now. We are here for another 6 or 7 years, so what if you didn't do good and lost? You have plenty more chances to show all of them up, she said firmly with a sage-like nod, finally making him smile and nod. Anyo. They heard a third voice and Naruto looked on in confusion as his opponent from before came from behind them. He put his hand forward with 2 outstretched fingers for him to take. You didn't make the seal of reconciliation earlier, as are the rules, and I don't want to ruin a tradition coming from generations on our first day here at the academy. He spoke with a smile. Naruto looked down on the outstretched hand and yet another smile broke onto his face while he nodded in return and stretched out his own hand with 2 fingers clasping his fingers in a perfect seal. It was a good match, you had me worried there for a few moments. Tsukumo spoke in an honest tone, shocking him to his core at the admiration his voice held for him. For Sakumo, he knew the boy was strong and would get even stronger in time, it was his gut feeling. I'm not sure if we are properly introduced. I'm Sakumo Hatake from the Hatake clan. It's nice to meet you, he said in a happy tone and extended his hand, this time for a shake and the start of a new bond of friendship between the two. Naruto once more looked down surprised at the offer of friendship and saw the genuine look in his eyes while his hand clasped the other one almost on its own. I'm Naruto Uchiha from the Uchiha clan. It's nice to meet you too. Naruto spoke in his ever-soft voice, getting a nod and a smile from his new silver-haired friend. Both stumbled when a white and blonde blur barreled into them from their side, clasping their necks with her arms. I wanna be friends too, chirped Tsunade with a cheeky smile, and all of them laughed at her antics while she put out her tongue childishly. Sakumo looked at Naruto with a raised eyebrow. You have quite an interesting friend indeed, he drawled out in an amused voice, and Naruto sighed softly, nodding sagely at his words. I told you, she's a bit impulsive, he answered tiredly, and Tsunade puffed out her cheeks and raised both her arms over their heads. Bonk, bonk, Kuso, it hurts. Both Naruto and Sakumo rubbed the small lumps on their heads comically in unison with a small tear drop in their eyes. Tsunade huffed and turned around, crossing her arms with a small scowl on her face. You two deserved it, she mumbled firmly, making the two smile at their impulsive female friend. Tsunade Senju and Misa Yamanaka, please step into the rings, they heard their teacher's voice and Tsunade's ears perked up. She grinned at having had her chance finally come up, and pulled the two boys behind her, almost dragging them like rag dolls behind her. All right, my chance. Finally at last, she chirped up, forgetting her previous anger instantly. The two boys glanced at each other and sighed in unison while they were dragged back towards the crowd quite forcefully. They had an impulsive friend all right. Both drawled out inwardly, and smiled as they wished her luck in her fight. Meanwhile, in the balcony on the second floor's hallways in the academy. A shame really, the brown-haired man commented, puffing out a small cloud of smoke from his lips to draw his companion's ears to him. Tobirama hummed in confusion at his words. The blonde Uchiha, he seemingly had no experience in hand-to-hand combat before this spar. But the stance was quite clear in his mind, most probably from learning the theory behind it. He missed many chances to counter, but his defense was still strong. A little more experience and he will be acing through the physical workouts in no time. The style was built for his body, fast and agile, requiring flexibility in maneuvers and the keenest of instincts. The boy was born with them in his palms, he will master that, if he has the drive to do so, that is, he explained, making Tobirama contemplate his companion's words. He has the drive, he finally spoke, getting yet another raised eyebrow from the smoking man by his side. Oh, you know him quite well, I presume. He intrigues you, doesn't he? He stated more than asked, and Tobirama merely stayed silent, his silence answering the man's question completely. The smoking man though smiled, seeing the three who were by the side near the tap and seemingly nurturing a new start to some precious bonds. This was the thing they lived and fought for each day, to secure a peaceful childhood for them before they were thrust into taking up the mantle from them and trained to be shinobi. He intrigues me too, the both of them do, he finally drawled out to break the silence that had sprawled between them when they saw Tsunade pulling them back for her turn to the ring like sacks of potatoes. This time, it was Tobirama's turn to raise an eyebrow. Though he smirked a moment later but said nothing, turning his eyes to see Tsunade's match. If it could be called so much. As soon as the match had started, Tsunade had charged and buried her fist in the other girl's stomach with all her strength. Who, in turn, had fallen unconscious. Everyone watching the match sweat dropped when Tsunade poked the girl with the tip of her foot's sandals. Oi, I didn't hit that hard, get up, I wanna fight. She poked her head again, but the girl was out cold. Tobirama and the instructor palmed their faces in unison at the girl's antics, though the former was still proud of his granddaughter to finish her spar off so early. Sensei, I'll make the seal of reconciliation later. She isn't making one right now, Tsunade spoke, poking her opponent yet again as if she were a log, getting a tired nod from the teacher who picked the girl up and walked her to the infirmary with a tired sigh. He had a girl high on sugar in his class, it seemed to him. She walked to her two new friends with a wide and proud grin which was seemingly returned by Sakumo wholeheartedly. You did great. He spoke, making her grin widen, and turned to her first friend to see what he thought of it. Congratulations. Naruto spoke in his ever soft and polite tone. She smiled, hearing the honesty in his calm and soft voice. He was certainly different than all her other friends, in a weirdly nice sort of way to her, and she nodded. They watched the rest of the matches till late in the afternoon, before the day was called off, much to the relief of some of the exhausted students. Naruto packed up his bag slowly to make sure he didn't forget anything, unlike his female partner by his side who was logging in everything hurriedly like a man on a mission. He saw her struggling with the zip, since the clogged up things in it were now making it quite bigger than it should have been, seeing it from the morning. Damn it! Close up! Tsunade scolded the bag, much to the confusion of Naruto, who sighed softly and decided to stop her before she ripped it apart. Anyo, you need help? He asked her and got a slight glare from the fired-up girl which turned into a tired sigh and a nod. He smiled, taking the bag and rolling up the scrolls and closing the books and things in it properly before placing them in an organized manner. Finally, he zipped it up and handed it to the girl, who took it with an embarrassed smile. Gomen, I get a little angry sometimes, she mumbled in a hushed whisper, which he dismissed and slung his own bag over his shoulder by his waist. They walked out of the academy together, with Sakumo having left a little early since he had some work, and both walked towards the clan districts together. Oi, you still have to show me that fireball jutsu of yours. She spoke up in their walk pointedly, making him nod in remembrance of his promise. Alright, I'll show it to you where I learned it then, K. He asked and got a happy nod from the girl. He took her to near the edge of his own clan compounds when Tsunade saw him walk down the stairs of the bank and onto the porch of the river. Naka River. Both young kids stood on the wooden porch of the river, watching the sun now halfway down, signaling they still had a couple of hours before it finally settled down completely. He took his bag off and kept it by his side, taking a deep breath before he got started on it. Snake right pointing arrow, ram right pointing arrow, monkey right pointing arrow, boar right pointing arrow, horse right pointing arrow, tiger. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. He exclaimed while his hands blurred through hand seals that were quite fast for Tsunade to follow. Even though they weren't that fast, to her they were awesome. He took in a deep breath, lining his lungs and windpipe with a protective chakra layer that was the first and most basic requirement of any fire jutsu to be performed without burning one up himself from the inside. It was the most volatile of the elemental natures for a reason. He blew out the hot breath churned up in his body and put his fingers near his lips in a small C-like shape for the fireball to be directed and controlled. The air coming from his mouth ignited due to the immediate change in temperatures as soon as it left his lips in a small shallow stream of flames going forward. Tsunade frowned and wanted to scold him for showing her a small stream of flames instead of an actual. She covered her eyes when the narrow stream suddenly expanded into a huge red fireball. The water in the river let out a huge hiss of steam, boiling under the extreme pressure of heat its usually cold water wasn't used to. Sugoi. Once more Naruto, I didn't get a good look at it please, she pleaded with her hands clapped in the manner she was saying a prayer, and he panted, wiping the sweat of his brow and nodded a little tiredly. He couldn't refuse his friend after all. He smiled, turning back to the river and took a deep breath. Snake right pointing arrow, ram right pointing arrow, monkey right pointing arrow, boar right pointing arrow, horse right pointing arrow, tiger. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. He exclaimed once more, and spouted out a narrow stream of flames that expanded into a full-blown crimson fireball once more. This time Tsunade watched on with starry eyes at the awesome jutsu he was wielding for her show tell right now. He panted a little and wiped his forehead, a small smile of pride on his lips for having mastered this jutsu for now. Though he did raise an eyebrow when he saw the wide puppy dog eyes of Tsunade staring at him pleadingly. Teach me, she said, instantly clasping his hands in her own, making him quite surprised at her request. He smiled a little and shook his head in negative, making her frown. It's not easy, Tsunade, he said, and her frown turned into a full-blown scowl, and he placed his finger on her lips when she began to say something to shush her up beforehand. It isn't that I don't trust you, it's that we don't know your elemental affinity for now. Kagami Oji-san told me that we can use our own element's jutsu rather easily than those that are polar opposites of them. If they aren't of your affinity, you have to first master the pure manipulation of that element before you move on to the actual jutsu part. You actually have to do that with your own affinity too, but we can use our jutsu, albeit a bit weaker than they could be, without learning pure manipulation first. He explained her, and she nodded with a calm look on her face now that she knew his reasons. So your affinity thingy is fire? She asked, and he shook his head. Dunno. Haven't checked it yet. Actually, Oji-san said we don't start on pure elemental manipulation until we are at least Chunin. He said, making her frown in confusion, and he knew the reason, so he sat down with her doing the same, and both looked down in the river's clean water flowing past their feet. I'm from the Uchiha clan, so I have a natural affinity to fire like all Uchihas, no matter my natural element. Every one of us has at least some sort of affiliation with the fire element, and all of us do master this jutsu, he explained her unasked question, making her nod sadly. Your clan is so cool, all that they teach me is some stupid chakra control exercises. All I can do is stick leaves on my forehead, she mumbled, waving her feet in the water with a saddened look. He felt really bad at her saddened demeanor, it didn't look nice on her chirpy face at all. Chakra control is pretty important too. The better the control, the less chakra we use in our jutsu, Tsunade. For example, I can only do at most 5 fireballs a day when I'm completely fresh for now. With more control I can increase it to maybe even double that, he explained, making her nod. It was the same thing her granduncle said too. You know everything, how are you so smart? She asked him with a voice laced with admiration. He got a little embarrassed from her words and waved his hand dismissively. I don't know everything, I just know a little about this because Oji-san explained it to me when he showed me this jutsu, and I read some scrolls at my house. He spoke modestly, making her put out her bottom lip cutely. Don't be like that, you're awesome. I wish I could do that, she said honestly, once more waving her legs to take her mind off it. Naruto fell in thought at how to cheer her up before he perked up. I know, how about I teach you a small fire jutsu used to light up small flames for camping and stuff, it's how I started. And even if you don't get the jutsu, you can use this in the future for outside camping and stuff, he suggested, making her grin and nod happily. He got up and showed her the little technique that was virtually simple and not at all dangerous for anybody. Seeing how small in scale it was, all one could get was a harsh throat for a couple of days if done wrong, unlike the higher ranked fire jutsus, and it was taught to everyone from what he knew, so he saw no harm in it. Alright, it only has 2 seals, one being horse, but the main one being tiger. That is the one that triggers all fire jutsus and is the last seal of them all, he explained, getting a nod from the girl. Both tried to light up some dry leaves and sticks for an hour before they saw it was a little late, and Tsunade picked her bag up. I have to go now, but I'll see you tomorrow, Kay? She asked, and he nodded with a smile. He was now looking forward to his days in the academy and walked her to the village's shopping center until they parted ways before remembering about the other thing he had to do now before he went home. Kami, I forgot all about meeting Mito Ba-chan, he exclaimed to himself and ran to the eastern part of the clan districts hurriedly. He looked around the place she had told him to look into and that he would find it easily. His eyes caught sight of a large house in the corner with a small spiral symbol on its entrance, the same one that was on her kimono's obi yesterday, and knew that was the place. Uzumaki clan compounds. Naruto knocked on the door and stood there calmly for a couple of minutes, trying to regain his breath while he was at it. Mito opened the door, having an idea as to who it might be, and much to her happiness it was her adorable blonde she was thinking of so much today. But she did frown with her hands on her hips. "You're late, Naruto-kun," she admonished him half-heartedly, and he rubbed his neck and nodded apologetically. "Gomen, I went with my friend and lost track of time." He spoke in a sorry tone, making her smile that he had made a friend on his first day. Cammy knew he deserved it more than anyone, and she welcomed him in, respecting the boy's true and honest answer along with his straightforward attitude. Naruto walked in the house's hallways, that had a lot more homey and warm feel to them than he had ever felt before. They were quite vibrant with many colors and paintings or some strange calligraphy, most probably seals, if he could guess right, all around the place. She took him to the calligraphy room she used for her own sealing practice and sat him on the couch. "All right, you sit here and I'll go and bring something to drink for you, all right?" she asked him, getting a small happy nod from the blonde who watched her leave and let out a little tired yawn, rubbing his sleepy eyes off their sleep. He was exhausted after that little expedition with Tsunade and the toll the day had taken on him. Mito came back with a tray of some cake and milk, only to smile silently at the adorable sight in front of her eyes. Naruto had fallen asleep on the table with his head resting on his crossed arms, no doubt exhausted from his day. She put the tray aside and sat by his side, brushing his hair gently to find him breathing softly, no doubt in a deep sleep at the moment. He looked so cute in her eyes right now. He must have been quite tired from whatever he had done on his first day, yet he had come to her for practice just because he had promised her to, and that in alone made her so happy. She placed a kiss on his head and scooped the boy up in her arms, to take him up into her guest room and place him in a proper bed for a nice sleep before she went to his house to get him some clothes and maybe his little furry companion too while she was at it. Konoha Ninja Academy. Alright kids, this is the final day for the second semester. The testing done today with all of you will go on your report cards, so please take this seriously, the teacher spoke, his voice and eyes pointedly glaring at a certain blonde-haired kunoichi of his who merely stuck her tongue out at the man for pointing at him specifically. Let out a tired sigh and picked the stack of papers on his desk, starting to distribute them all around the class. Naruto took the paper from the instructor, putting it down on his desk with the blank side facing him as was instructed to them, and waited patiently on his desk, his fingers crossed in front of his mouth with an almost peaceful aura surrounding him. The instructor stood in front of the class, glancing at the clock to see it was almost time, and spoke up as soon as the second hand of the clock hit 12. "You may begin." His voice rang through the silence of the room. Naruto flipped the test around, his eyes working their way through the questions furiously to see if there was anything that would trouble him. And much to his relief there wasn't anything of that caliber, instead it seemed a little easy to him. His baby blue eyes glanced to the side, to see Sakumo raring past the test like an enraged bull, and he snickered softly at the boy who seemed like he would burn straight through the paper in a few moments. Then he glanced up front into the second row from the front where his blonde friend sat, and he let out a soft sigh from his lips. "I'm doomed, Ka-san is going to kill me for this." Tsunade cried in her head, fantasizing what kind of punishments would be levied out on her for failing this stupid test. She hated history with a passion. What were they going to do with knowing who became the Shadaime Tsuchikage after all? That guy was most probably dead, for crying out loud. Now anatomy and biology were cool, she always aced those tests. It just intrigued her so much, and she would be able to know more about the workings about the human body with that. Not learn about some stupid guy who has been dead for decades and haunting her life right now. She pulled out her hair in frustration. How could she have fallen asleep when she had finally decided to get to studying for this last night? Oh, that's right, it was so boring that she had fallen asleep quicker than listening to a lullaby. And she didn't even want to know what her granduncle was going to say when he heard of this, which he most probably would. "I shouldn't be doing this," Naruto sighed softly, but in the end the temptation to do something for her was too much. Plus, Shinobi didn't play fair, that at least put some of his guilt at rest for doing this. He flicked out a kunai when the instructor was listening to a student's doubts regarding a question, for which he was quite glad right now. He saw the small amount of blank space at the bottom end of the paper and smiled a small smile, brushing his hand through his silky hair coming onto his eyes to seem totally normal to everyone around him. He channeled some chakra into it while it was right above his lap. The kunai hummed a little, making him quite nervous, and glance up to see no one had noticed and quickly cut a straight line on the bottom end of the paper. The kunai cut cleanly through it as if a machine cut, leaving no evidences that he had tampered with it, and pocketed his kunai again, picking his pencil up to start working on 2 of his tests. He ticked all the multiple choice questions one by one with relative ease, whizzing past them and writing down the answers at the bottom of the cleanly cut paper to some of the rest of them. The teacher walked up, looking about the class, and stopped by Naruto's side. His eyes narrowed in on the boy's paper, quite specifically, the bottom half of it. Naruto was barely containing his nervousness and kept going through ticking the questions so as to not rouse any attention from the examiner for their test right now. "Hey kid," he called, placing a hand over his shoulder, making him stiffen and give the man a nervous smile. "Hi sensei," he asked, afraid that the teacher might have caught on to him when the teacher pointed to the small scribbles jotted down on the bottom half of his sheet. "This is an official academy test to be graded by the educational authorities. Rub off your little notes before you hand the test in, or you might get some marks deducted for that," he pointed out and went down the stairs to keep his gaze on all the students. Naruto let out a sigh in relief and continued working on both his tests quickly and efficiently. The cut was made so clean that the teacher hadn't noticed it, and he was glad for that right now. His training was paying off in spades right now. He put his pencil down as soon as the last question on it was answered and looked up to see Tsunade with her hands over her head while her chin rested on her desk, no doubt still lost as to what she would do now. He slid the small slip from the bottom of the test out and put it over his lap, held between his index and middle fingers. His eyes glanced to the instructor to wait for him to get into the perfect position for him to do this. His eyes narrowed calculatingly when the man reached the far end of the other corner and his back turned to him. Perfect. He's in a blind spot. There's no way he'll see this, he thought, a smirk now adorning his lips as the slip in between his fingers hummed and straightened like a slim sheet of metal when chakra coursed through it, and he flicked it expertly towards his target with a flick of his wrist. Clack. Tsunade looked up startled when a slip of paper embedded into her desk like a shuriken with its corner engulfed deep in the wood. A moment later it lost its sharp edges and fell down like a simple slip of paper that she quickly slid down onto her lap before someone saw it. She looked to her side to see her partner too nervous to notice and turned her honey eyes down to her lap. Question 1. Land of Gold. Question 5. Samurais are only found in the Land of Iron. Question 7. Fire Daimyo is protected by 12 of his hand-picked shinobi called the 12 Guardian Ninja. Question 10. The Water Country has an additional branch in their Black Ops instated by the Shodai Mizukage to hunt down renegade shinobi of their village called the Hunter Ninjas of the Kiri's Anbu Black Ops. Note. Start studying history. It isn't that boring and I won't always be there to save you. Naru. Tsunade crushed the small slip of paper in her palms, pocketing it quickly. She bit her lip and turned her eyes to the back only to see Naruto gazing out the window and seemingly done with the test, no doubt at some bird's nest he had found interesting. She saw his lone eye glance at her for only a moment, his lips adorning a small smirk before he turned his eyes back outside while his chin rested lazily on his palm. She looked down onto her paper and let out a soft smile. He was always looking out for her no matter what, just like he always did. Whether she asked her or not, she knew he was watching her. Like he always said, "I've got eyes on you, Suna," in his soft yet playful voice to her whenever she was hard-pressed in some tough situation. And he would give her that cammy annoying poke to her forehead as if she was a spoilt child in his eyes when he would pull through a trick of some kind, which she most probably was in his eyes. She quickly jotted down the answers he had sent for her, seeing how little time she had left. As soon as she had finished the last answer, a voice was heard throughout the academy. RRRRIIIINNNNGGGG. The bell rang, marking the end of the test, and the instructor stood fast in front of the desk looking at all his students firmly. All right, time's up, pencils down, he called out, getting all students to obey. Now come up one by one and put your tests here on my desk face down, and you can go for the accuracy and weapons tests outside, he called out, and everyone did so. Naruto got up, putting his test down on the instructor's desk, and walked out, putting his hands in his pockets to look for Tsukumo. A blonde and white blur whizzed past the students coming out of the class and straight onto the oblivious blue eyes boy's back. You're a lifesaver, Narumwa, Tsunade chirped up, jumping onto his back with a giggle while her arms were around his neck for support and her knees curled up back, and she placed a tight kiss on his cheek. Oi, where's my kiss? A third voice drawled out from behind them, only to see a silver-haired boy grinning stupidly at the two. Tsunade stuck her tongue out childishly. It's in hell, you'll get it after you die, Saku no Baka. Tsunade retorted, instantly getting a chuckle out of both the boys while she hopped down her feet to feel a couple of fingers poke her forehead. Start studying history, idiot. I won't always be able to bail you out, Naruto spoke in a half-scolding manner before walking out for the training grounds. Tsunade puffed her cheeks and jumped by his side to walk with him. Well, you could have helped me get more than the passing marks, Tsunade retorted dryly, rubbing her forehead with her palm. There was only enough time for you to jot down what I sent, Suna, Naruto replied back with another poke, making her bristle in anger, yet she couldn't deny his words. The bell had rung as soon as she had finished writing the answers he had sent for her. It annoyed her to no end that he always seemed to know everything, and he was always right no matter what he said when it came to the stuff concerning anything related to shinobi. Now stop being such a wise guy, and Kami forbids stop poking me, she shouted, rubbing her forehead, her face flushed with anger, while he just walked on, completely unfazed by her angry words and quite used to her antics by now. Tsukumo though. Guys, am I missing something? He asked in a lost voice, not getting what was going on, and fell in step with the two bickering blonde friends of his. Nothing for you to worry about, Naruto answered simply, putting his right fist out only for Tsukumo to side bump it with his own left fist. Yeah, now let's ace those damn shuriken and kunai tests, pumped up Tsunade, happy that it wasn't anything related to history now. Weapons and accuracy tests, Tsukumo corrected wisely, making Tsunade frown. Smart, she mumbled with a cute pout, making Naruto chuckle and Tsukumo to grumble about the stupid nickname she had stuck him with. The trio stepped out with the rest of their batch mates to see a table lined up with kunais and shurikens, as well as several bull's eyes on the opposite wall. Alright class, this is the last grading test for this semester. All of you have to throw 6 kunais and 6 shurikens to score as many points as you can. Now I'll call 2 of you in pairs so we can get this over quickly. Now, the teacher called them out by turns. Tsunade got 11 points out of a possible 12, with Tsukumo a close 10 behind her by a single point. Everyone got off their turns until it came to the last 2 with matching surnames on the list. Naruto Uchiha and Jin Uchiha, the teacher called out while the 2 boys stepped forward. Jin glared at Naruto with all the hate he could muster. He resented him with his very being ever since the second half of their first year, when Naruto and Tsukumo had finally started to catch up to his high scores before surpassing him and leaving him in the dust with the blonde at the top and his friend a close second in just about everything they did, while Tsunade was the kunoichi to beat in their batch, with her topping just about everything except history, that is. Jin picked up his weapons and threw them all by the turns, each hitting a perfect dart in the center, making him smirk at seeing the perfect score of 12. There was no way he could be beaten. In Naruto, Uchiha scores a perfect 12 with a single point for the extra credit demonstration while throwing all his weapons at once. The teacher's voice called out, lacking any hint of pride or warmth, and a small scowl on his face at seeing the target's center laden with kunais, with the shurikens forming a small plus around them. Everyone let out oohs and ah of shock at seeing his target, while the boy calmly stepped by his friends to find Sakumo with a competitive glint in his eyes and trying to burn holes in his target while Tsunade was puffing out her cheeks. Show off, she mumbled, and Naruto sighed. She was going to burst her cheeks one day if she kept this up, and the instructor stood in front of them after rounding up the last of their scores. Alright, congratulations you all. This marks the end of your second year. Now you all have a month-long vacation before we move on to the new year. So go on and enjoy your time with your family. He called out and stepped into the building, leaving happily chattering students behind. The trio retrieved their bags from their lockers and slung them on while walking out of the academy. So what are you guys going to do in the vacation? Tu-san is going to finally start training me in Kenjutsu this fall, Sakumo said, working out the kinks in his back with a stretch while they wailed through the streets of the village. I'm going to study some more anatomy and biology in my free time and gamble some of my money at that Han and Show game I found last week at a stall in the shopping districts. You know, there's a 50% chance at my winning, which is higher than any other, so finally my luck will shine. Tsunade chirped up, pumped at her idea, and Sakumo dropped his head in defeat while Naruto let out a soft sigh of defeat too. What about you, Naruto? Sakumo asked to gauge what his friend was going to do in his vacation, and Naruto shrugged carelessly, making the two of his companions sweat drop. Dunno, train in what I find interesting and study some scrolls. He asked, more than stated, making Sakumo nod. That was just how his friend was, he knew that much. Guys, I'll go and see you two tomorrow at our usual place, Sakumo said hurriedly, making Naruto raise an eyebrow at his agitated friend. What gotten into you? He asked, with Tsunade nodding in agreement to get a cheeky smile from their friend. I'm going to go get myself a nice training katana today for my vacation-long training, Sakumo said, making Tsunade and Naruto look at him in jealousy while he smiled in victory. Lucky, the two mumbled with a slump in their shoulders. Sakumo laughed and ran off towards his house while waving his hand back at them. Alright, I'll see you tomorrow, Yane. He called out, and both waved at him. Naruto walked towards the clan districts with Tsunade in tow and rose an eyebrow when she didn't take the turn for her house. I'm coming with you. Don't wanna go home right now, she said, simply making him nod. It wasn't unusual for her to spend her day at his house. No, she loved lazing around there and had almost made it her haven away from home. Uchiha clan compounds. The duo of friends walked within the fortified clan compounds of the Uchiha, getting several curious glances towards the girl by our hero's side, but none were too surprised after seeing it several times already. Though none did understand why or how Tobirama had allowed his granddaughter to be so close to the Uchiha family's heir he had resented the most in his past, but none were brave enough to question his decisions. Naruto opened the large gate to his estate and walked in with Tsunade in tow, her hands clasped behind her back with a little smile. He slid the key in his door and opened it to step inside his house. Tsunade slid off her sandals and threw them everywhere before hopping in the house, leaving a sighing Naruto behind. He slid off his own footwear and put them neatly, doing the same for his impulsive friend when a small sound rang in the silent hallway. Moo! A soft mule reached the ears of both blondes, making Tsunade perk up. She saw the glowing slitted eyes and grinned, seeing the adorable white cub with her tail wagging happily at seeing her master return home. Kiara. Tsunade chirped in a chipper tone and ran up to coddle the adorable thing in her arms. Kiara ran towards Tsunade herself, making her grin and open her arms when she jumped up in pure bliss. When the white blur went past her side and she landed straight on her face onto the floor. Her body twitched comically, while the cub in question rested in Naruto's arms comfortably with a purr. He brushed her fur and rubbed her head with a finger, kissing her head gently. You hungry girl? He asked the cub, who mewed in affirmative, making him chuckle and move inside the kitchen while Tsunade sat on the ground with a twitching eyebrow and a tick mark dawned on her forehead. That traitorous, no good, ball of fur, she mumbled furiously, watching her friend walk inside and went in only to plop down on the couch tiredly with a sigh of relief. Though she did glare at the cub, who hopped onto her couch and was standing in front of her face with a curious glint in her eyes. What do you want, traitor? She mumbled in irritation, getting a tilt of the head from the cub in question, and her heart melted when she licked her cheek. Ah, come to mama, she cooed and scooped her up in her arms, hugging her for dear life, which the cub loved if her purrs were any indication. Kiara, come and have some lunch. Naruto's voice rang in the kitchen and she slicked her way out of Tsunade's arms expertly, who tried to keep her in her arms, but ended up falling off the couch face first, again. She grumbled incoherent curses at the feline, rubbing her aching nose with an annoyed expression on her face, seeing her lap up whatever he gave her to eat quite happily from her bowl. Half an hour later, Tsunade was lying there lazily hearing the crickets in his large gardens, and Naruto sat on the porch with the cub lying on her back and her legs high up in the air. Where does it all go, you glutton? You don't even grow up, neither are you fat or chubby, you're still so small, Naruto asked the cub while tickling her stomach to get muffled mewls from her. Her paws tried to pry him off, but to no avail, and Tsunade smiled. Kiara had become a part of their group too over time. Oi, where are you guys? A familiar voice called out, surprising them quite a lot. We're in here, come on up back, Tsunade called out, and sure enough both saw Tsukumo come around with his hands behind his back and a wide grin on his face. Tsunade laid on her elbow, looking at him with a raised eyebrow. I thought you were going to buy your sword smart, she pointed out wisely, getting an eye twitch from the boy at her name calling, but he gulped it down for now and grinned. His hands were put out in front to show them a beautifully crafted katana unsheathed with a completely white blade and a black sheath to go along with it in his other hand. Tu-san gave me the family sword when I got home. I ran straight from home knowing you two would be here. Isn't it cool? He asked with a cheeky smile, getting nods from the other two, who were looking marvelously at the beautifully crafted sword. It's called the White Light Chakra Saber, by the way. It's been passed down within my family for generations now, he explained to add a bit more fascination to it, and got dumb nods from his star-struck friends while Tsunade ran her finger on the blade in amazement. Sugoi, you got such a cool sword, Tsunade whispered, making him puff his chest out proudly. Idiots have all the luck in the world. She continued, making him deflate and cry anime tears at her words. Naruto laughed, and all three enjoyed their free day happily to enjoy their friends' happiness together, playing around the house some card games, Tsunade's choice by the way, of which she won none of them as always. A week later, some unknown clearings on the borders of the village. Naruto walked past the trees covering the forest-like clearing, while taking in the beautiful sights to his heart's content. This part of the forest, he had never been in before, and he was sure no one else had either, seeing the non-trampled grass growing all around the area. He looked up and smiled at seeing the sun rays coming past the leaves of the trees and illuminating the beautiful clearing with its sheen. His feet took small and careful steps, to avoid any dangerous insects or snakes going around on the ground. He loved doing this, to see the places in the village no one else ever ventured into. It was a loss in his mind of their own accord to not explore the place they lived and breathed in down to its very core. Finally, he walked into a small clearing in between the thick forestry of the seemingly lost to time area of the village. He looked on amazed at the large and thick tree in the middle of said clearing, as if it were the whole nerve center of the village. He walked closer to the tree, which was of the size of a small house in itself, and touched its large bark with his small hand. He could feel the synergy of life it breathed and the small pulses the tree was letting out each passing second, as if it were alive and breathing. He walked around it, looking up and down the tree and wondering whether to climb said tree or not, when he stopped abruptly as his eyes caught onto something strange. His baby blue eyes narrowed on a particular part of the tree covered with wild vines, and he flicked out a kunai from his holster, carving the weeds out and brushing it clean with his palm to read a small thing inscribed onto it by human hands. Kanahagakure no Sato. It read, and he started hacking away the vines cleanly by channeling wind chakra through it and finally cleared away the small portion of the bark he wanted to see so much right now. Today we stand here, asking ourselves the same question every shinobi has probably asked himself at one point in his life. What is a shinobi? Why do we kill others as a way of living, mindlessly staining the ground scarlet? My friend asked me this today too, after our small truce of peace marking the stop of centuries of conflict between our clans. So I answered him today, and we decided to carve this out for life here as a sign for the future generations to remember the horrors we went through and the time when we stopped to think of the past that lay behind us. A shinobi is one who endures no matter the obstacles. That is what we could say in a sentence. Why do we kill then? Why destroy life? To protect life, life must be taken. That is the very law of nature. The cycle goes on, but what differentiates us from animals is that we have the sense to feel others' pain and bask in it to share his sufferings. That is what me and my friend dreamed of years ago, a place where everyone will understand each other's sufferings and pain, and grieve together. A place where children will grow up peacefully, shielded from the violence outside the confines of that peaceful wall covering them. We dreamed of a village where children, adults and the elderly would come together and form bonds. Where children won't be thrust out to kill before they knew how to hold a brush and could enjoy the taste of sake before they died. And today the two of us are content that this dream has come true. For today, this place marks the beginning of the peace we dreamed of achieving one day and shake hands to form a village where everyone can be happy. Today, here with a shake of our hands we unite the two great clans of the Senju and of the Uchiha to form Kanahagakure no Sato. Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, year 1197 Warring Clans era. Naruto's eyes widened and he reread the whole thing again before brushing the inscription with his palm. Gigi, he whispered to himself, realizing what the Shodai Hokage and his grandfather had went out to achieve together. No one had come to this place since then if he could guess right, and it was seemingly forgotten. He read the thing again and again, not getting enough of the beautiful words inscribed on the tree. The handwriting was mixed of two people, one of Hashirama Senju and the other of Madara Uchiha. The year was the last year of the warring clans before shinobi villages rose up from everywhere to achieve what the two formidable clan leaders had once sought to achieve and had it in their palms at that time, seemingly bringing an end to the clan wars and halting the mindless bloodshed then and there. His senses tingled suddenly, his eyes snapping back and glancing dangerously to the side. He flicked his kunai into a tree, making the birds fly up from it, and he stood up, looking around the clearing furiously. Who's there? He called out, getting nothing but silence in return, and clenched his fist tightly. I know you're there, so no point hiding yourself anymore, he called out yet again, and this time a reply did come back. You're good for a child your age, to be able to sense my presence at so young an age. You are the grandson of that man. Basking in the writings of his lost dreams, the childish voice cackled a blood-chilling laugh, making him flick out kunais in each of his palms and stand in his defensive kata, crossing the kunais in front of him defensively. What do you want? He asked in a guarded tone, knowing he was all on his own in this abandoned part of the forest. Nothing, the voice echoed from everywhere, and his eyes roamed around to gauge his opponent's location. His untrained senses not quite able to pinpoint whoever it was that was hiding here. But everything, the voice said in a cold voice, making him stiffen when he saw a strange hooded figure with a straw cloak sitting on a tree and launched his kunai at it. The figure caught it in his finger by its hole and shook his finger in a not-so-good fashion. Your potential lays hidden, he whispered suggestively, confusing the blonde boy with his words. Naruto could feel a foreboding feeling in the back of his mind at seeing the figure who was hiding his appearance expertly in the shadow of the tree so he could not see him. What do you mean? Who are you? He asked him, taking out a round of shurikens in his free hand to be ready for anything, and the figure cackled. Who I am is not important, but your hidden potential needs coming out now. But certain conditions must be met to do so. He spoke in his same childish tone, once more throwing him in for a loop. What conditions? What potential are you going on about? He asked him to milk everything he could from the man who laughed evilly. The potential that can only be found when you would lose someone you love right in front of your very eyes, he whispered, leaning forward with a waving finger to make his point. Naruto couldn't help but shudder at whatever psychopath he had come across. Today you'll achieve it, he whispered suggestively, once more baffling out the blonde boy. Your friend, that girl, he whispered, and Naruto's eyes widened in horror. He only had one female friend. He looked at the man with such hateful eyes, it almost made him shudder and lick his lips at the same time. What have you done to Tsunade? I swear if you have done anything to her, he threatened the figure on instinct, getting yet another childish laugh from him while he waved his hands up in defense. No need to get all riled up on poor old me, I come in peace, he spoke childishly, making Naruto snort inwardly, though he tried to gauge what the man wanted right now. He was much more than what he seemed to the eye. Then why mention her when you come in peace? He asked him seriously, to know what he was talking about. Well, anyone would mention a person who was abducted by some shinobi of a rival village, nay? He asked curiously, and Naruto's kunai dropped in shock. What? He asked in a whisper, but the figure heard him and grinned, seeing his horrified eyes. That girl, I saw a man take her from a clearing. All tied up and gagged, slung over his shoulder like a sack, he trailed off, feeling a cold metal on his neck. He glanced back to meet the cold eyes of the blonde and saw the boy he was talking to right now disappear in a puff of smoke, making his eyes widen momentarily. Shadow clone, he thought, and heard a small whisper in his ear that made his grin widen to ever epic proportions. Where is she? Naruto asked coldly, and the man couldn't help but feel glee on his insides. The southern edges of the village, he must have crossed them by now and moving on towards the borders of the country. I would hurry it up if I were you, he whispered before Naruto saw him disappearing right in front of his eyes, as if he wasn't ever there in the first place. Who was he? Was he telling the truth? What should I do? He thought, his mind jumbled up with a million doubts and questions right now, while his hands shook in fear of what might happen to her. Should I go back to the village for help? No, would take too much time and the man would escape cleanly without a trace, seeing how far I am. There's only one way then, he thought before blurring from the branch he was on a moment later and rushed past branches, blasting several off on his way with huge bursts of chakra from his feet. He saw the trees coming to an end and jumped down on the ground, running at blazing fast speeds, as fast as his legs would go, while pumping them with chakra to keep his muscles going without tiring even a little. You're going the wrong way, Gaki, a voice spoke from his side, only to see him the strange figure hiding in that cloak of straws from before. You won't be able to catch up with that man no matter how you see it, he spoke wisely, making Naruto glance at him dangerously. Watch me. He spoke calmly, before the figure saw that the blonde was running for a huge cliff. Naruto increased his speed twofold and jumped down with a start, opening his arms to twirl himself in midair while the figure stood on the edge, completely dumbfounded at the actions of a certain Uchiha. Though when he looked down, he saw Naruto taking out a kunai in his hand and embedding it in the rocky surface to slow down his fall, and grinned. Interesting, most interesting, he cackled and disappeared into thin air yet again. Naruto's hair flailed around with the air passing through them when his kunai snapped in half from the force it was experiencing. He took out another in both of his hands and embedded them in the rock at the same time with all the force he could muster. It worked. His speed slowed down and he buried them into the rock right to the hilt to get blocked by a small boulder in there and halt his motion momentarily, and he placed his soles on the rocky surface only to let out a burst of chakra to kick himself back and backflip to land on the ground while skidding backwards and stopping himself by burying his kunai, which were chipped off to the point of no return now. His arms ached with the huge strain he had put them through, but he paid it no heed and started running again. He jumped from boulder to pass the small stream quickly, and just as he did, he was out of the village's borders. He ran up to see the start of the forest and hopped up on a branch to begin his chase yet again. He smiled a small smile of relief when he saw a small patch of a footstep on a branch and knew he was now right on tail of whoever the abductor was. The man must be in a hurry if he hadn't cleared off his tail and confident that no one would follow him. But his mind was completely jumbled up by the figure from before. Why is he helping me? What the hell does he want? He thought, but shook the thought off. He would have time for that later. Right now he had a man to stop. A man with a face mask covering his face along with full black clothes for stealth hopped from branch to branch straight towards the rain country's borders. He smiled behind his mask. The information about the small slips in security of the leaf had been spot on, and now he had the Senju heiress on his shoulder. Then they could rebuild the Senju clan in Kumo and use her offspring or even the girl herself for making perfect Jinchurikis. The Raikage was going to be smiling in glee at having her in their midst with the leaf unknown about her loss until it was too late. Swish. He jumped sideways, but howled in pain when 3 shurikens got embedded in the back of his left thigh. Tsunade wriggled in her bonds and her screams were muffled by the gag tied over her mouth. He looked back to see the forest completely empty and growled behind his mask. You have some nerve, leaf scum. I am a censor myself. You cannot hide from me, he shouted in the seemingly empty clearing but got no response in return. Swish. His ears caught the sound of another sound of metal whizzing in the air and he ducked when a lone kunai went past where he stood a moment ago, only to growl in annoyance and look around furiously. Finally, his senses tingled and he grinned. He turned around to see Naruto falling down from a branch over him, a kunai in his hands to embed it straight in his skull. He launched a volley of shurikens himself while mentally sighing in relief that he was only dealing with a little child so he could get this over with quickly. Naruto's arms and legs curled up to cover his front while the metallic stars got embedded in each of his limbs. Tsunade shouted in her gags and wriggled wildly at seeing what had happened, only for her eyes to widen when Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke and a small log fell in place of where he was a moment earlier. A substitution? The masked man growled, once more looking around when he turned around and blocked a kunai-laden hand with his forearm, only to meet the cold blue eyes of his attacker. Naruto slashed at the man's waist, who jumped back quickly to dodge it, and the blonde followed him just as quickly, not letting up his charge and give the man any time to reprieve. The Junin took out a sword and parried his twin kunai strikes expertly with small glancing blocks as if they were mere annoyances. But he had to admit the boy was fierce and relentless in his slashes, that were being executed with perfection laced in them. You damned brat, leave while you still can before I put you into an untimely grave, the man growled, having to fight with one hand while the other had supported his captive on his shoulder. The Junin finally had enough and pushed back, slashing at Naruto a vertical strike, who blocked it with a cross guard over his head with his twin kunais. The blonde winced at the brute force behind it and was forced to one knee, skidding back when he saw the man letting out a kick with his right leg and blocked it by crossing his arms in a cross guard. Naruto cursed inwardly. The man was too strong and experienced, with the only disadvantage that Tsunade was on his shoulder. While he, on the other hand, could not use his arsenal of ninjutsu comprising mostly of fire jutsus and shadow clones that would only drain him quickly and leave him open for the kill from how exhausted he already was after the long chase to catch up to the man for 3 hours now. He ducked under a horizontal slash and rolled away from a vertical one that followed it, while the sword was embedded in the ground with a small cloud of dust to show the force behind it would cleave him straight through if it made direct contact. The Junin had to give some points to the brat, no matter how annoying the pest was in his eyes. You're good brat, but how long can you keep this up? Better give up and I'll make it painless, the man taunted while Naruto paid no heed to the man, but he was right in his assumptions. He was tiring himself out quickly and at a severe disadvantage on his hands. Ninjutsu was nowhere near sights for this fight, lest he burned Tsunade along with the man when he caught the man in a trap with his clones, for which he had nowhere near enough chakra to pull off the numbers that would need. He was at a severe disadvantage at taijutsu since the man was a Junin, having the experience and advantage of strength over him. The only thing keeping him alive was his agility and speed, and that too was failing quickly as he was forced to dodge another swing of his dodge, and the man was adapting to his style slowly yet surely. That left only one choice. He threw one of his kunais at the man, who flicked it away with his sword and charged at him. Naruto's back met the bark of the tree, making the man grin and bring his sword down in a vertical slash to cleave him in half. Naruto twisted himself around the tree and dodged it at the very last moment. He hopped back a couple of steps with the Junin following him, and now his sword had lightning coursing through its blade to be done with the blonde even with a merely small glancing blow. If only I could make hand seals right now, this brat would be dead, he thought, and gave a roundhouse kick for the blonde's arms, who twirled around a tree and dodged it at the very last moment yet again. This went on for 4 times until Naruto fell on one knee, sweat dripping from his face like rain drops while he panted for dear life. The man chuckled a humorous laugh seeing the downed boy in front of him. I must say, boy, you were good to be able to hold yourself against a Junin for so long and still breath. But now, he walked closer to the boy, bringing his sword up to end his life when the blonde let out a swipe to take his legs off from under him. The Junin hopped over it and let it pass underneath him harmlessly, putting forth a kick in mid-air that met the boy's chest and threw him back into a tree's bark with a crash. Naruto coughed violently and slid down, panting and wiping his lips of the blood from his busted lip. The Junin shook his head with a laugh when Naruto started going through hand seals. You won't be able to do any ninjutsu that would be able to take me down with the chakra levels you have right now, kid. This fight is, he trailed off when he saw the blonde's shadowed eyes glance up, now seemingly crimson with a single tomo in each of them, and ended the sequence on Tiger, making his eyes widen in realization and horror. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. He exclaimed, pumping out a volley of small fireballs that made the Junin hop back a couple of steps, right into the middle of the clearing. Just my luck. I get an Uchiha along with a Senju. You're going to be my compensation for wasting my time, brat. But at least you will be a worthwhile present back home. The Junin chuckled, letting the boy make another sequence of hand seals to pump out whatever last ninjutsu he wanted to before he fell over unconscious due to chakra exhaustion himself. Fire jutsus took a hell lot of chakra, and it was only a matter of time before a little child like him. Uzumaki ceiling style. Naruto's voice rang in the clearing, and the man stopped laughing and looked around at the 6 tags slapped over the trees all around him glow in unison while the blonde went through strange hand seals he had never seen before. But he had heard of the reputation that the Uzumaki ceiling skills held in the world. His mind went back to the 6 last moment counters that Brat had done just now, and only now did he realize what he was doing. But still. Impossible. There's just no way an Uchiha like you could know seals, he shouted and raised his sword to charge at the blonde when Naruto made the final seal with a tired smirk. 6-point paralysis seal. Fuin. He shouted when his remaining chakra reserves started getting depleted drastically and kanji sprout out from all over the tags and covered the man and Tsunade all over their bodies and halted his charge midway while Naruto's eyes watched in slow motion as the tip of the blade came towards his right shoulder and stopped just a hair's length away from making contact with his body. Naruto kept his palms on the ground, keeping the seals around him pumped up, and the man paralyzed with a smirk while a bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. You damned brat, how long do you think the seal will hold up? I can feel it wavering due to your depleted reserves right now. What do you think you'll achieve by stopping me for a little while before I cleave you? He sneered at Naruto, who shook his head in humor, further confusing the Junin. I'm not stupid enough to try and stop you, he panted with half-lidded eyes, making the man look at him dumbfounded, and he merely continued, completely ignoring the man. No. I'm merely stalling you. He completed with a deep breath, and his Sharingan wavered for a moment, making the man smirk that the seal was about to fall along with the boy. For what? He asked curiously before he slayed down the boy and took him with himself, and the boy's smirk widened ever so slightly, confusing him yet again. For them, Naruto said before he fell down to the side and the seal disappeared to give him free movement. The man was confused when he felt a hand clasp the back of his neck in an iron grip while Tsunade was slid off his shoulders roughly. His head was twisted around forcefully and his eyes widened in horror when he saw the two pairs of glaring eyes in front of him. "You have some nerve to try and abduct my granddaughter in broad daylight." Tobirama's cold voice rang through the clearing while Sasuke Sarutobi stood by his side and untied the little bonded girl from her bonds. His signature cigar dawned on his lips as usual, letting out small wisps of smoke in the air. "Gigi, how did you know I was here?" Tsunade asked in confusion, making Tobirama answer her without taking his eyes off the man who was struggling in his grip for air and squirming like a headless chicken. "Because of Naruto," he explained, and the Junin's eyes widened at his words. How? He rasped out, not being able to get how he was able to get a message to the Hokage so quickly. It just wasn't possible for him to do so. "The boy took a shortcut by the cliff behind our village to follow you, which was the only possible way for anyone to chase you on foot with the distance you had covered beforehand. Just as he crossed the river where our village's borders end, he let out a huge pulse of chakra on purpose to alert our barrier team." Sasuke spoke, and the Junin glanced at the unconscious boy with incredulous eyes before his eyes rolled due to lack of oxygen and he fell unconscious when Tobirama hit his pressure point on his neck and let the body fall down like a sack of potatoes. "To think Mito even taught him about the intricacies of our village's barrier defense system. She isn't letting up on training him." Tobirama. Sasuke spoke up, making him turn his glance to him and nod. It was ingenious of the boy, to chase as well as alert him of danger at the same time. Only when he contacted the barrier team that he came to know that his granddaughter had left the village too. Had he known what was up and used the Hiraishin marker placed on Tsunade's necklace to track her down. The man had planned it through by placing a suppressing marker on the girl, but the Hiraishin was still acting like a tracking beacon for him even if he could not flash to her. The man was much too confident in his plans to be cautious of him. "Naru." Their thoughts were broken by the soft and concerned voice of Tsunade, who had his head clasped in her arms for dear life. Her hazelnut eyes looked at him with all the concern in the world. "Hey, wake up," she whispered, patting his cheek when his eyes blinked unfocused for a moment. His blurry eyes focused for a moment to see Tobirama's wide eyes along with some strange brown-haired man's cigar dropping from his mouth in shock. The last thing he heard was the soft voice of his friend before he blacked out completely. "Naru, your eyes," he heard, and Tsunade saw him fall limp and tears welled up in the corner of her eyes while she hugged him to death. She felt a hand clasp her shoulder and looked back to see her granduncle's stoic face holding a small smile on his lips for reassurance. "He's fine," he spoke to calm the girl down and got on one knee when a tear rolled down her puffy cheek. "But," she retorted with a soft sniffle when he placed his fingers of her lips to shush up her mumbles. "He's just exhausted. The boy ran 3 hours straight and jumped off a cliff to chase after you besides taking a Junin head on. He'll be out like a light for a week before he's up and about again," he explained the girl who started wailing for her life while clutching her friend for dear life. That idiot, what the hell was he thinking, jumping off a cliff? "I'll send him straight into a coma when he wakes up," she sobbed out, making Sasuke chuckle, and Tobirama slapped his palm over his face with a soft chuckle. Maybe he shouldn't have mentioned that. Even he couldn't stop from laughing now that the rush was finally over and his granddaughter was fine and dandy thanks to a certain Uchiha. But he did